God, family reunions must be really awkward in the Time War. You know, you're just trying to sit down, have some Christmas turkey, and then the old crotchety git comes in to talk about all the Time War stuff and the Daleks and no more, and etc, etc. It must be really awkward. Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and I'm continuing my epic quest to try and catch up with the massive Big Finish backlog that I've accumulated over the past few months. And next on the docket, we've got Volume 2 of Susan's War from Big Finish Productions. Now, Susan's War is a range from Big Finish, which follows the Doctor's granddaughter, Susan, played by Carole Ann Ford, reprising her role, going through her experiences in the Time War, where she has essentially been recruited by the Time Lords as a sort of diplomat, essentially a non-combat role. Her grandfather, the Doctor, for the most part, is sort of carving his own path in the war, doing his own thing, whereas Susan is trying to change the system from within, with a much more humane perspective informed by her experiences with the Doctor and also growing up on Earth. Volume 1 came out in 2020 and comprised of 4 one-hour stories, one of which involved the return of William Russell as Ian Chesterton to do a diplomacy mission on the Sense Sphere with the Sensorites, and the final story of that box set was the Shoreditch intervention, which saw Susan and the 8th Doctor get caught up in remembrance of the Daleks retcons. This box set, Family Ties, is a much harder value prospect because it is 2 one-hour stories, with The Lost Son by Sarah Cassidy and The Golden Child by Peter Ankelhidis. I need to check that pronunciation, 1 second.
The Golden Child, written by Peter Angelides.
Angelides. I was close. I got there. I mean, if it's wrong now, it's because Jonathan Cardy got it wrong. Blame John. And this box set is essentially a set of family reunions. The first one is The Lost Son by Sarah Cassidy. It follows Susan, played by Carole Ann Ford, and Commander Veclin, played by Beth Chalmers, who's a regular in the Big Finish Gallifreyan Time War range, being sent to the planet Mataros, where the priestess there, Vessalina, played by Heather Bleasdale, has sent out a distress signal because her son, the heir to the throne, has gone missing. Mataros is a neutral player in the Time War. There's something mystical about the planet which prevents the Daleks from invading. The Time Lords want to know what that mysticism is, and they decide while they're there they might try and help find the child. The citizens of the planet are telepathic, and there's a callback to Susan's telepathy as a Time Lord, which was alluded to in stories such as the Sensorites amongst others during the 1960s, because that was an angle that kind of went woefully unexplored during Carole Ann Ford's tenure on the show. And maybe it's through that telepathy, or maybe not, but let's not get into spoilers, that Susan is reunited with her late son, Alex Campbell, played by Sonny McGann. Now, for those of you who don't know, Alex Campbell, from Susan's perspective, was last seen in the Doctor Who universe in a Big Finish story from, no joke, 2011. Alex is killed by the Daleks right in front of Susan. He is dead, past tense. This is an ex-child. And Susan is very much firmly in the grieving process. And she has this encounter with Alex on this planet, and this is like head and shoulders the standout of the entire box set. Just Carole Ann Ford's performance, the despair in her voice, the incredible, astonishing emotion she's able to wring out of these scenes is something else. I'm like nearly on the brink of tears just listening to her go through this whole grieving process again as she tries to come to terms with the fact that she definitively saw Alex die, and here he is now right in front of her.
I don't understand. You look exactly the same.
You look older.
I am older, perhaps wiser, but I can't explain this. Where have you been all this time?
Where have I been? Where have you been? You left me.
I watched you die. My own son, in front of my eyes.
They tortured me, Mum. They kept me captive and they tortured me.
What? That's impossible.
You never wanted to be a mother. I slowed you down, stopped you having adventures.
No, Alex. I wanted to be your mother. I was a good mother.
A good mother? A good mother doesn't leave their child with exterminators.
You were dead, Alex. You were. I don't know how they brought you back, but I saw your last breath leave your body.
Not quite my last.
Sonny McGann is good in these scenes, though a bit limited because he's being deliberately standoffish and stoic. But, I can't get too much into spoilers here, but Carol Ann Ford's performance, blimey, she can act. But what I will say, though, is that these scenes in The Lost Son kind of overshadow everything else in the story, which kind of falls to the wayside, at least emotionally. I'm not even, as remotely invested in this lost child that's gone missing, when I know that it's meant to sort of, parallel Susan's grief, and that's why she's able to relate to the priestess here, because she's also lost her son, or the son's gone missing, and that's why Susan's so invested in this. But honestly, it's so hard-hitting, it is so impactful, and nothing else in the story even remotely approaches that level of intensity. And oh my god, my heart just sort of breaks for Susan a bit, because unbeknownst to her, Alex is still alive, technically, kind of, in the Doctor Who universe, and is travelling around with the 8th Doctor, and she just doesn't know that. That penny's got to drop eventually, right? I know that, Alex is maybe sort of a clone from the Daleks, or that been revived by the Daleks for some scheme that has not really been alluded to, even though that box set dropped years ago. That's a plot thread that has not really been resolved in the Time War yet. So yeah, that penny kind of has to drop eventually now, right? I mean, The Lost Son does such a strong job at setting up that aspect of Susan's character continuing forward in the Time War that it kind of has to now, right? God, words are gonna have to be had in this family. But yeah, the whole subplot about the missing child, it just isn't remotely as interesting. What's happening in terms of the plot is that Commander Veclin is doing all of the busy work and the investigation in the main citadel on this planet, and she's kind of investigating and trying to figure out how the son was able to escape through a locked door with a camera looking at it from the outside that's always being watched. How did this happen? And honestly, it's kind of obvious who did it, because it's a small cast. There's only 2 other characters in this story. Yeah, the mystery element kind of fell flat for me. And then once the motive of the person responsible has been revealed, it is one of those, they were absolutely right, this is a massive societal injustice, and it's probably for the best that this happened, and no one kind of acknowledges that in the story. It's a really weird moral dynamic that the story is quite equipped to deal with. It is one of those, it's sort of like the stereotype now, where you've got the person who really wants to stop climate change by destroying the world. Oh, we would support you in theory, but now you've gone too far. It's just like that. It's like, okay, this is a big injustice on this world, but they took it too far. Come on. If I understand moral ambiguity, that's kind of the focus of many Time War box sets, but I do think that in this particular story, I don't even think the story itself kind of knew what it was trying to say there. I think the third act does kind of fumble. But also, I'm not going to claim to be a Time War completionist or a Gallifrey completionist. If you are, please let me know if my read on this is incorrect, but I think that Commander Veclin in this story is kind of out of character. Beth Chalmers in the interviews at the end of the story is saying, oh yeah, she doesn't really care about what's going on this planet, she just wants to get in and get out and get the job done, because that's what the mission that she's been assigned to do. But Commander Veclin, she is a malleable character, and she does act differently around Susan than she does around other people because of Susan's nature as a diplomat. That makes sense, that works, but of course Veclin should be invested in what's happening on this world, because there's something on this world which is preventing the Daleks from invading. So Veclin should be yeah, let's go, let's figure out what's... But no, Veclin is okay, whatever, I'm just here. Susan, just act with your head, please, not with your... I kind of feel like Veclin... Character assassination is too strong a word, but this does not read true to Veclin, for me at least. I don't know, maybe you folks who have listened to all of the Gallifrey sets, because Beth Chalmers is a great actress and she's able to make it sound credible in her performance, but in terms of her actual behavior in the story, I don't really know what she was kind of doing here. In concept, I do like these stories like The Lost Son, where you are sort of on the fringes of the Time War in these non-combat zones doing these diplomatic missions, but in The Lost Son, it gets so overshadowed by Susan's B plot or A plot, whatever, however you want to designate it. It gets so overshadowed by the emotion of that everything else that Sarah Cassidy's put into this story, from the world building and the characterization of the people on the world, it does, it kind of falls flat, unfortunately. And that's partly because Carol Ann Ford is just such a great actress and runs away with the story. I'm not blaming her for that. She plays it astonishingly well. It's one of my favourite performances of the entire year for Big Finish, but you kind of work with what you're given here. The rest of the story is just, unfortunately, not really on her level. Except, however, for the music. Andy Hardwick's score, which punctuates some incredibly dramatic and intense moments. Across the whole box set, Andy scores lovely. It's like really melodic and classically inclined, great instrumentation. The music was really, really strong. I know that, Big Finish tends to have some good but often minimalist music in their box sets, but in Susan's War Family Ties, it really stood out for me here, really affecting musical motifs. And next up we have The Golden Child by Peter Angelides. The story follows Susan and her friend Andalor, played by Tanya Rodriguez, who is essentially a Time Lord librarian who is studying these massive figures in Time Lord mythology, and she's a massive fan of a Time Lord called Maxor, who is a massive, incredibly vital figure in the Time War, who forged several alliances, who led several battles, who's just an incredibly pivotal character in the Time War that helps ensure Time Lord victory in some certain key battles. However, Susan does not know anything about Maxor, does not remember Maxor, and nobody else in the Time Lord Society apparently knows who Maxor is. It seems that some strange Time Lord timey-wimey machinations have time-locked him out of existence, which is bad because he's a pivotal part of the war. So Susan and Andalor have to try and break through this time lock and discover what happened to Maxor. And what follows is this really interesting blend of stories like It's a Wonderful Life or A Christmas Carol, where Susan and Andalor try to manipulate this Maxor's life because they see him in speeches, they see him growing up and going through the academy and stuff, and he's just a rotten guy. He's just not completely unlike what you would expect or need from a Time Lord leader. So they try and engineer his life and push him in the right direction to become this great noble military hero that they need him to be. They sort of try and create John Connor from the Terminator films, and along the way they discover the War Doctor, because he also has his eyes on Maxor.
What was all that? The Great Conciliator?
He's not like that in the histories.
He's no different in private than he was in front of the Senate.
I can't believe it.
Are you sure that's Maxor? Your Maxor, I mean?
There was only one Senator Maxor on Ghostan. There must be something in his life that changes. There has to be.
He's a boorish, self-centered bully. He can't bring his own people together, let alone an alliance against the Daleks.
I should go back in and talk to him, reason with him.
He doesn't seem to be the reasonable type.
You have to get away from here, Susan!
Who's this?
My granddaughter can introduce us later.
What?
I said chit-chat later, after we run! Hurry up, the pair of you!
Grandfather! What happened to you? The last time I saw you...
Ah, yes. The earlier model's still out there somewhere. I'm rather hoping not to bump into myself. Avoid an awkward conversation about things to come. This way!
You've crossed your own time stream. You shouldn't be here.
Lucky for you that I am.
Lucky?
Unfortunately, if you want an exploration of the War Doctor and Susan's differing ideologies in the Time War, or a lot of interpersonal drama and relationship stuff, you're not really going to get it in this story, because the War Doctor is almost like a ominous background figure who is sort of like puppeteering things behind the scenes with his own TARDIS. Meaning that the main interactions we get between Susan and her grandfather, but the grandfather who has abandoned the name Doctor, the main interactions you get are sort of, oh, you're not like the Doctor, I know, my grandfather's completely changed. It is sort of kind of surface level stuff like that, unfortunately, which is a shame, because you have these great actors, Carol Ann Ford, Jonathan Carley, you also got Tanya Rodriguez in the middle here as well, doing a great job. It does kind of feel like surface level character stuff. The interesting aspect of the story, the interesting angle, is the moral dilemma, which is explored in the third act, in terms of like what it means to be a successful leader, to be a successful, wartime mythic figure, and what the justification to do that, and how Maxor is created in the end. Really interesting twist ending that I think throws a pretty cool bit of like Time Lord lore like on the table for fans to sort of dissect and analyze for years to come. I think it's a pretty interesting ending, but I think that the character stuff, there's not an awful lot on the table here, which means I kind of passively listened to this story, unfortunately. You know, it's fine, it's solid. Like, I think that the music, once again, like the first story is really solid throughout as well, but I think that The Golden Child, it's got really interesting formatting, it's got really interesting structure to it, but I think that the actual character work lets it down. It prevents it from having a big impact in the long run. I think that the story and the structure is too interesting and too intricate in order to have the effective character beats that you would want from a reunion story with the War Doctor and Susan. I think that those two selling points of The Golden Child are kind of at odds with each other. Personally, for me, if I had to choose an intricately plotted story with a moral dilemma, or would I choose the character stuff with Susan and the War Doctor, I think for the first outing, I would choose the latter, because that is kind of the novelty here. Susan, who is trying to change the establishment from within with Gallifrey in the Susan's War stories, meets the War Doctor, who has sort of exiled himself from the war to fight on his own personal front. You know, I want to see that explored. I want to see that develop and how these two come to blows. But with having the War Doctor as this background figure for most of the story, it means that you kind of lose that, which means that the more interesting character stuff that fans might be more invested in like the broader scope as opposed to the immediate stakes of this story, that's sort of like dangled like way in the background. And I want to see that story. That's kind of what I want, but I don't know. Maybe that's me. That's sort of my subjective read on it. I still think it's a fine box set. It's sort of like difficult to justify like whether or not it's worth it in terms of like the nearly £20 price tag for a CD and download, because it is 2 one-hour stories as opposed to the previous Susan's War box set, which is more expensive, but you do get 4-hour-long stories here. There is another box set that comes out later next year in 2025 presumably, called Grandfather Time. We've got the last of the Khaleds and the Vord Alliance in this box set. Unfortunately, we don't really know anything else about this box set. We don't even have cast members outside of Caroline Ford confirmed, so will we see more Paul McGann? Will we see more Jonathan Carley or other incarnations of the Doctor or other characters in the Time War? We don't know, so maybe hold your fire on picking this one up. Maybe wait for Grandfather Time and maybe get these two in a bundle or something. I don't know, unless you are like the biggest Susan stan ever. I mean, like I said, Caroline Ford gives an incredible performance in The Lost Son. It's like one of her career highlights, I think, in terms of playing this character. Like, no ambiguity there. But whether or not these new chapters in the Time War are worthwhile stories on their own, we might have to wait a little bit longer for those answers. So yeah, what did you folks think of Susan's War family ties? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to like this video, subscribe for more Big Finish Doctor Who reviews, and I'll see you folks next time.